Welcome to Receiving Noor's weekly Quran study. In this new season, we are studying Surah 45. Last week, we did the first five. We reflected on the first 5 verses of Surah 45, al-Jathiya. And we'll continue to journey in the Surah. We also had a homework. Sister Yamina had left us at verse 6 and asking us to reflect on what could signs, ayat, refer to in that verse. So shall we start with that homework if anybody had a chance to reflect on this? Maybe I can actually read first. Let me go ahead and do this. Let me go ahead and remind us the first 5 verses and the 6th verse, and then we can see if anybody got a chance to reflect. And I will turn to Sister Yamina. How does that sound?
Yep.
Okay. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حاميم تنزيل الكتاب من العزيز الحكيم Hamim, the bestowal from on high of the book issues from God, the Almighty, the Wise. In the heavens as well as on earth, there are certainly signs, messages, ayat, for all who are willing to believe. And in your own creation, and in that of all the creatures He scatters on earth, there are signs, messages for people who are endowed with certainty. And in the succession of night and day, and in the means of subsistence which God sends down from the skies, giving life thereby to the earth after it had been lifeless, and in the change of the winds, in all this there are messages for people who use their reason. So these were this is the translation of the first 5 verses, in which we studied last class. And then the 6th one says, استعذ بالله تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق فبأي حديث بعد الله وآياته يؤمنون. These messages / signs of God do we convey unto thee, setting forth the truth. In what other tiding, if not in God and His messages / signs, will they then believe? So in this 6th verse that we...
can you repeat the last one, the translation that you did, Dr. Sura?
Sure. So these messages, signs, ayat of God, do we convey unto you, setting forth the truth. In what other tiding, if not in God and His messages / signs, will they then believe?
So hadith you translated as message, right?
Yeah, no, hadith is not quite translated here actually. Well, tiding, yeah. In what other tiding? فبأي حديث, tiding, news. Hadith can also mean news. We'll unpack verse 6 more today. Last time we came up till verse 6. We just read it and left it there. So we will pick up from verse 6 and we'll unpack it more. But for now, especially in the very first sentence of verse 6, when it says, these are...
the ayat.
Yeah, and actually, tilke means those, but it tends to translate it. Those are messages, ayat. Those are the messages that we are reciting or conveying onto you. So what are those messages? What are those ayat referring to? And
so the one which we just discussed. I'm so sorry. Last week I started it, but then I couldn't hear the whole program, so I went to listen to the tape, and I did some tadabbur on these ayats that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is first talking about iman and then yaqeen and all the methodologies that is supposed to be used with all the ayahs. And ayat would include the universe and human being themselves as well. as well as the ayats of the Quran, right? So this is what I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this is all I have to offer you. And with your akhal, I mean, you are supposed to figure it out. And if you can't figure it out from this, then too bad, I mean, this is all, I mean, those people who were successful in the past, they did their job and they used their akhal in the right direction and came to a perfect conclusion with yaqeen. And so everyone is in the same boat, and it's just a test of using your akhal. And that's how a man worships his God, not like angels who are programmed to do it. But human beings have to use their akhal. They have to derive after analysis, and so it's a test of cognition.
So you're saying that the ayat in this verse 6, those are the ayat of God we convey unto you. Those ayat contains the universe and then the signs inside in a human being.
If you see the whole cross section of ayats, I mean, even a layman or us, let's say a neuroscientist, can figure this out. So the ayats are all around for every person of understanding and different tastes and different interests. So there is not a single place where, or an event or a time period in which there is no ayat. So we are all immersed in it. And if they can't get it, then that's a big insult, I think, to the cognition, that they are not using that cognition. I was discussing this with also Dr. Sirai this morning, and he made a very important point that, first you see the ayats, like, you see the ayats, then you do an analysis, cognitive analysis, and then you come to an intuition. And at that point of intuition, there's a big jump. If you have done your work in analyzing those things, then it's the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from Ghaib that He gives you that guidance and understanding. So that was for me also. I learned something from him while discussing. I was discussing something else, but we also discussed this. So I think that's a very, very important point.
Very nice, Sister Asma.
Even in science, Einstein did tadabbur in theory of relativity. If he didn't, obviously he couldn't have come to, So it's people who think and people who don't think, and because of the thinking or tadabbur, that's what makes a difference, and in the world and afterwards, I think.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's absolutely beautiful that you got a chance to go over and also talk and reflect on this. And definitely I also agree that when I read verse 6, I was like, ayat, sometimes they're interpreted as the text, the Quranic text. Sometimes it's rendered in many translations as signs in the world, and we know it can mean both. And I tried myself to look at maybe it's one of them, it's not both, but it really it's hard to distinguish the two, the messages that are brought by the prophet and the messages in nature or in our own souls pointing to God. They are all under the same category of ayat. The only thing, of course, here is that when we see them all interconnected, we should also note that it's through one we know the other. Meaning, if there is no prophetic message, if there is no messages sent directly in a human language through a trusted prophet, it will be very hard, actually impossible, for us to decipher the ayat in nature, in the creation, in our own souls, because we could tell there's something. Even Einstein could tell by looking at the universe and studying that there is something beyond this. But the prophets take us further. They don't just confirm our intuition that there is someone, something, some orders, but they take us to a deeper level of literacy, if you will, to be more literate about reading a flower or the rain or our heart. So connecting the nature with its maker has this depth that is only revealed through the prophet. It's like somebody deciphering, understanding that there is piece of language that, let's see, there's the Chinese calligraphy. I look at it and I don't know Chinese, so I may just move on. I think I don't even realize it's a piece of writing. Some smarter people look at it and they say, look, this must be saying something. But this is how far we go without the Prophet. The Prophet comes in and teaches how to read that calligraphy. They teach us Chinese, I mean, if you will. So in this context, the Prophets teach us how to really see the divine mercy and beautiful names.
Yeah, that's a very important point, because in the beginning, the philosophers, and especially the Jewish philosophers, they would think that just by aql you could come to the truth, or al-haq. But that's not the thing. The Quran says no. The aql is there. Of course, the first thing is aql. The aql you use in Quran, and Quran directs your aql in a proper channel and brings you to the end point of al-haq. And that's what I was a little bit had some difference with Dr. Siraj on this point, that it's the Allah's guidance finally, but you have to do your part, and our part is to do the
like here then the Quran, as we're studying in the Surah, is actually those messages, those ayat. The Quran is, these are ayat that explain the other ayat. The ayat
like complementary, like
they go together.
Yeah, they're complementary. But you remember in Surah Baqarah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the creation, when Adam alayhi salam is told to go down and spend the time on the earth and all that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the guidance will come from me. That means even though he was a prophet and everything, but he did use his aql, he forgot a little bit. So there are some weaknesses in human beings, and that weakness can only be cured, or I don't know what the correct word is. I'm using cure. Is the only solution is the Quran, and like you said, the guidance of the Prophet, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Prophet, the guidance of Allah through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's important. And then there was one more verse I wanted to mention in 210 Surah Baqarah. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then what signs are they waiting for? Are they waiting for the angels or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come in front? That's the last stage left,
Yeah, as we unpack more this verse, maybe we'll bring that again.
Thanks, Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for sharing. Andrea, did you want to share something?
I'm just in the need of orientation. So could you remind me on which verse number we are? And we will continue now reading these verses. And
yes,
do you want us to ask questions during or more at the end? Or what is the preferred style?
The style is we had a homework. So we were talking about the homework. We were looking at verse 6 of Surah 45. And so we're done with the homework part, unless if there's anybody else to share. And then we'll turn to Sister Yamina. And absolutely, people can ask questions during the discourse, or they can also wait and have the Q&A at the end. Right now, we're just doing the homework.
And the homework was, what are events that are signs of God, right? Something like this.
No, no, not quite. Like the verse 6, if you look at verse 6 in the beginning, it says, those are the signs of God. And what are those? We were talking about what are those signs, especially after those 5 verses.
Right, so the homework was to come up with signs of God in your life, right? So events that happen that you take as signs of God. Because I did my homework.
Okay, go ahead. If that's what you reflected on, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so signs of God, for example, if something that you really want happens, so that would be a sign of God. Or something that you really want doesn't happen, that would be also a sign of God.
Okay, so maybe as we talk more today, maybe that we can talk more about how the signs would work. Is that all?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay, thank you for sharing. So now we turn to Sister Yamina to kindly lead us in tonight's study, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So as Isra just reminded us, had started Ayah 6, Al-Jathiya, Sura 4, and we had started question, what are, and Musa was repeating the word homework. I was thinking maybe homework is because we tend to think of homework as a burden, an assignment, but this is more like an opportunity to engage with the Quran, which we're supposed to be doing all the time. This is God speaking to us, speaking to me, guiding me. It's the most important thing we're supposed to be doing in our life. Everything else should be revolving around it, inshallah. And so we asked, what are those signs? And in Ayah 6, استعيذ بالله السميع من الشيطان الرجيم. تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق فبأي حديث بعد الله وآياته يؤمنون. Those are God's signs that we convey unto you, setting forth the truth. In what other discourse, in what other speech, in what other hadith, if not in God and in His ayat, in His messages, in His signs, will they then believe? And we said, what are those signs? It's interesting that when Isra was reading the translation, in her translation it was these, but actually literally here saying tilka, not hadihi. It's not these are God's signs, but those. Those has that connotation of immediate. It's something that needs reflection. It's not something that needs a conscious intentional reflection and conscious choice of looking at them and finding out actually that they are signs, that they are ayat. Because without the guidance Quran, we wouldn't know that everything around us is meaningful and carries messages, and that they are therefore ayat. And so, in order to know what those ayats are, when we say these, immediately we think of the ayah 1 to 5 of the Quran in this surah, and maybe also the rest of the ayat in the Quran, the units of the Quran. But when we say those, even when we read ayah 1 to 5, read the ayat after Hamim, the bestowal from on high of the book issues from God the Almighty, the Wise, in the heavens as well as on earth. There are certainly ayat for all those who are willing to believe, and in your own creation, in that the creation of all creatures, and in the succession of night and day. So you see that these ayat, the ayat of the Quran, the Quranic ayat, they are very intricately intertwined to the creation and ayat, to ayat takwiniya, the ayat in the creation. So there is no way to think of them separately or separate them. The creational ayat, therefore, are also included in those ayat, in tilka ayat. Because I cannot consider the ayat of the Quran without considering what they are referring to, what they are asking me to reflect on. So we saw that in ayah 3 of Surah al-Jathiya, it was إِنَّ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. There are signs and ayat for the believers, those who are willing to believe. And in our own creation and in the scattering of all living creatures, there are ayat for people who have certainty. And in the 5th ayah, it was in the succession of night and day, and in the way provision is sent to us through water, through rain, and then everything being given life with that rain, with that water, after it has been death, and the way the winds are also changed. And in all this, there are ayat for people لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ, who use their intellect, their reason. So both Quranic and creational ayat are conveyed onto us in order to set the truth. They confirm each other, and this way they establish the truth of the divine message. The divine message that is contained in the Quran and that is articulated in the creation. Because if the Quran was saying something that has nothing to do with the creation, there would be no way to confirm it. But because the meaning, that message, is echoed in the creation, it is reflected, it is expanded in the creation, not only we can understand the meaning of the Quranic message, we can also confirm it. And unless we learn to read and to reason and to decipher the ayat of the Quran together with the creational ayat and vice versa, any claim to truth would remain just a claim, an assumption, until it is verified in the world, until we observe it and make shahada and witness it. We cannot justify the truth of the Quranic ayat through the Quran itself. That would beg the question. That's called circular reasoning. It's true. The Quran is truth. This ayah is telling the truth. Why? Because the Quran says so. And this is not Quranic reasoning. This is not what we are taught in the Quran. In the Quran, we are invited to reflect on the observable evidences, on the things around us, and to find out that they are ayat and that they are indeed, as the Quran describes, they are indeed also speech, they also have meanings, they also are conveying meanings and purposes and reflecting the divine names, the Wajhullah, the face of God, to us. When we consider these ayat together in the way that is suggested to us, that is taught to us in the Quran, then we can confirm that both the Quranic ayat and the creational ayat confirm each other, support each other, translate each other, explain each other. And therefore, both are truthful divine discourse, divine hadith. Here, hadith. Hadith can be a discourse, a speech as well. The hadith that we know, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that's a technical term. Here it's hadith in Arabic as a meaning discourse. And so it is, this is very important. This reading together is very important. And the Quran teaches us how to read them together. So there is no ta'aqqul on our own. We make ta'aqqul, then we realize, oh, the Quran must be true. Then we wouldn't need the Quran. That's exactly what the Muslim philosophers said. That's why they said there are twin sources of the truth, the Quran and the intellect. Because if I could myself reflect and find the truth, then I don't need, and they say then you can confirm that the Quran, yes, is correct, but then I don't need it, because without it also I can find my way. But that's not how it is. And of course what they did was they never traveled the path, they stopped at the threshold, because yes, we do prepare to receive the what Sister Esma was talking about, like when we look around and we are in awe at what's going on and we think about it and we think that this is so meaningful, there must be something else. That's the beginning, that's not the end. That together with that thinking and reflecting and observing and searching, there is that intuition that there is something else. That intuition is already given to us. Now we are prepared, now we are ready to receive the guidance. And if we are willing, of course, if we are willing to receive, then we start asking questions. What is beyond? What is this meaning for? Where is it coming from? Who is taking care of this? What do they really mean? And so when we have that willingness to pursue the answers, we are ready to receive the guidance. And then we start acting on the gift, on the gift of guidance. And when we start acting on the gift of guidance, we realize that we are taught how to make ta'aqul, how to reason in a way so that we can decipher the creational ayat, the ayat in the creation, so that we understand that how they are making tasbih, how they're glorifying God with his beautiful names, for instance. What is important at this stage is that we understand why taqleed in iman, taqleed in belief, is unacceptable in the Islamic tradition. This is unanimously Muslim scholars agreed that imitative faith, imitative belief is not acceptable. There is need to contemplate, there is need to reflect on the ayat of the Quran, and therefore on the ayat in creation, because that's what the Quran tells us to do, in order to confirm the truth of the message. Otherwise it would be just a claim, an assumption. In ayah 6, we are told, okay, those are God's signs that we convey unto you, setting forth the truth. We got this far, inshallah. Those are sitting in what other discourse, if not in God and his ayat, will they then believe? So we're reminded that if we do not believe in the ayat revealed to us in truth from God himself, God means the maker of everything, the creator of everything, our creator and sustainer. So who else can know apart from whoever made everything? And he speaks to us in conformity with our understanding. It means in a way that we can grasp the meaning of the ayat in the Quran as they reveal to us the meaning and the purpose and the truth of the ayat in the creation, and therefore within ourselves as well. And if we don't follow the guidance so as to believe in the ayat revealed to us in truth, then we are told there is no way we would believe in anything else, because this is guidance, it's light, it's conveyed onto us in a way that we can understand. But if we still resist it, then who else can help us? What other speech or discourse or will we believe in. And of course, this means that the issue is not with what we are invited to believe in, but in ourselves, in our attitude, in our intention. Because this question, which is a rhetorical question, which means really you want, because like this, it means that the Quranic message makes the path of light and guidance so evident for us in a way that there is no room for doubt or denial or objection for anyone with a sound intellect and an open heart. This is what it's really telling us. It says, what else will you believe in if you don't believe in these signs that I convey to you, setting forth the truth? And just before that, it's referring to the creation that we experience, that we live in. It's talking about our home, water and food and day and night. And so if we don't have the intention to consider and reflect on the meaning of all these things, it means we are not open. We don't want to know the truth.
We had. Can I just ask something? Because I'm just afraid that if I wait longer, then I will get lost.
Sure. Go ahead, inshallah.
We had last time. So the verses that we had last time, which were the ones before 6, they were in this order for all who are willing. So there are messages, and this phrase was repeated for all who are willing to believe. And then the next one was who are endowed with inner certainty. And then the next one was for people who use their reason. So when I understand you correctly, in its moment, you are talking about how to actually come from the first one to the second one. So how do you come from belief to firm belief? So there were, I think the words that were used were Iman, and I forgot the other one. But the other one was like that you can trust, and you can only trust when you do that investigation and when you have that evidence. But the thing that was puzzling was that so for people who use their reason comes after that firm belief. And then we said that, so we were thinking here with my friends that there is a difference of reasoning with having firm belief or without. So there is a difference of being smart without, so in an atheist way, being smart, or then or kind of having first came to the point where you saw the signs and got the evidence and have that trust and so on. And if you can say something about that, but I'm not sure if it fits here. I just was worrying that later it will feel even fit less.
We talked, I think, more about that. Trust was a result, but it's more about that willingness to accept our vulnerability and have that humility before the divine, before the creator and his creative activity, and accept the fact that we are dependent. Even in the beginning, even if someone doesn't accept a creator, we are needy and we are dependent on everything else. We are not self-sufficient. That's very key. Because otherwise, if we take it for granted that we are self-sufficient,
can you wait for it?
Put you on mute. Put yourself on mute.
There.
If we take it for granted that we are self-sufficient, and for instance, that we forget that the world is impermanent. And so whatever reasoning we are going to reason after that even the reasoning, the steps are correct, but the premises are all false. So it won't take us anywhere. That's why reasoning on its own is not sufficient. That's why those who are willing to believe comes before. Once we are willing to believe, once we have that open heart, when we are willing to surrender to our reality and the reality of createdness, then we can start reasoning properly, and then we can learn how to reason from the Quran. So here it's telling us that
reasoning comes even after the inner certainty. So people who use their reason doesn't. So if you just believe, that's not enough. You have to be on that stage of trusting and humbleness and vulnerability, and only when you are there, after that it makes sense to reasoning, if I get that right.
Yeah. After that, reasoning is going to be useful. It's going to be increase that trust, increase that belief, and increase that certainty. But if we think we are reasoning when we jump all the other steps, when we are when we're deceiving ourselves, when we're lying to ourselves, when we are in totally heedless of what's going on, we can reason as much as we want. Our premises are false. The result will always be false. And it becomes a vicious circle then.
So the reasoning is then actually only at the stage where you already realize that everything is coming from God, including the reasoning.
Yeah, that's the way of putting it. Yeah, Alhamdulillah. Yes. So here, the way we are asked here, what other discourse, if not in God and if not in His messages, in His ayat, what else will you believe in then? It means that this God's ayat are very clear, because they make the path to light, the path of guidance, so clear to us in a way that there is no room for doubt or denial or objection for those with a sound intellect and an open heart, because without open heart, the intellect is not going to be sound anyway, because ta'aqqul, reasoning, is only a function. It's going to be either functioning for the heart or functioning for the ego. And if the ego is deluded, then everything will be lies and deceptions. The results will be lies and deceptions. So it only seems unconvincing to those who deceive themselves, those who are unwilling to let go of their deceptions, their illusions. And part of the illusion is sinful life. I'll do whatever I want because it's my life, therefore I decide. But the big lie is that it's not my life, it's given to me. And that's why those who deceive themselves and remain therefore close to the truth, those people remain unaffected by the ayat, by the guidance and the light in the ayat of the Quran. And their hearts are not moved. Mm-hmm. In fact, such people may not be affected by any true word until they change their intention. The moment they change their intention, it's like putting the switch of the light on and off. That's the intention. If we don't have the intention, nothing can help us, nothing can enlighten us. And I said, yes.
Can I just say one thing here as we are moving from verse 6 to 7? I'm looking at this tafsir called Ta'wilat in Arabic, and he's saying that when the verse says, what other discourse will they believe in other than God and his ayat, his signs? He's suggesting that we already noted it, but it was nice the way he put it too. Like, these are the signs that point to his his essence and his attributes and actions, af'al, sifa, wa and he says anybody who's not open to this, who's not accepting seeing these ayat, then there's nothing. The rest, there's nothing other than that. So the only real is this reality. And he makes reference to verse Surah Najm, Surah 53, verse 23, where it says that these are just names that you have named.
إن هي إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم.
Yeah, these are just some names that you made up, you and your forefathers. Because he's saying, other than God and his signs, there is nothing. What is there is just...
or let's put it the other way around.
Names without a musamma. He says there's ism without musamma. Like in that.
Yeah. If we put it the other way around, the reality of everything is grounded in the divine creativity. It is grounded in the divine names, in the source that's creating them. If there is no source, that whatever we see would be just like an illusion. And that's the deception, that's the lie, that's we will be living all our life in an illusion, because at the end there will be nothing left, according to that misguided understanding, false understanding, false perception of the world, of life, of being.
Can I also make one more comment?
Go ahead, inshallah.
Yeah, this topic is of course very important for me, right? So the question, so someone who doesn't listen to God and does some kind of sinful. So you said that if I know that that I'm created by God and that I'm not my own property, then I can't do any sin. And that's what we usually say, right? Someone who is fully aware of this wouldn't be able to kill another person. But I just want to say that these kind of verses are so sensitive, because it is so easy to misunderstand them, in the sense that, okay, then for verse 8, so then hear God's messages, then like when someone is preaching. But to me, that is usually hearing God's messages is what he really says to me. I mean, the signs that I have. So it's kind of the whole belief is training me in becoming more sensitive to the messages in my life, which includes my feelings and which includes the things that happen in my life. And I just want to make that contrast very clear, that it's really not at all about what someone preaches about sinful behavior or not, but it's all about the conversation between me and God.
That's yes, except that I would like to add something again, to be careful again, because to keep the balance is not always easy. It's easy to go one extreme or the other. So one extreme is, like you said, preaching, and it becomes only about something nothing to do with me. The other extreme is only about me. Okay, even when I am learning how to decipher the sign, for instance, within ourselves, how am I going to decipher them? It's not up to me. I make up meaning, because I could be making up meanings. So I first have to learn how to decipher. And I have a point of reference, and the point of reference is in the Quran. That's the Furqan. And so that's my criteria. Anything that goes against the criteria, it will tell me that red light, be careful. I think you are not listening, because sometimes we think we're listening, but we are not listening. We're just making up, interpreting. We're saying it means this. Does it really mean that, or is it my wishful thinking? So it is something we need to be more responsible and more sensitive. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, when you are not clear, when you are, then keep away. If there is any, go to what you are sure is good, what you are sure is allowed. Don't go into that gray areas where it could be, not clear what's going on. And because it's not, what matters is that our intention is always following that qibla, following the qibla here is that willingness to surrender to the will of God. Why? Because He knows what's best for us, and I have no idea. What I think is good for me today, tomorrow I may think it was not such a good idea after all.
I agree, I really agree. But the point is that my journey here in life is to kind of get to the point where I confirm. If I'm never able to confirm what is said in Quran, then it would be useless. And
yes.
And there are many things to know. Like you can't take the Quran literally, but it is in parables, and you have to make that all the exercises that are necessary on the way, like to get to a Quran understanding. And so, but the main point for me is that's why we are reading the Surah, right? I mean, it's more clear on that, and that it's not impossible. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the first thing we can confirm is that, for instance, we are not self-sufficient. We don't know, and therefore we need guidance. That tomorrow we may not be in this world, so today I'd better live my life in a way, in a meaningful way that has a purpose, that is a purpose beyond the impermanent, a lasting purpose that looks to akhirah, that looks to the lasting divine names. That's something that we are sure about and that we can start working on because it's one thing to know it and another thing to be totally at peace with it, so much that it's not a burden. The reality, it's just the other way around. It's an opportunity. It is not a burden. It's not something that we are carrying on. It's like getting on a ship instead of swimming. So it's actually a gift. So it's a relief. It gives us a sense of relief. Alhamdulillah that we have this guidance. When I was thinking why I talked about sin, because that's what Ayah 7 is going to talk about. And also because when we don't want to change, when someone doesn't want to change his life and live in surrender to divine will, he will justify himself. This is what we are all very good at. That's what the Quran also we're told. That's what we do. We rationalize what we're doing, and we actually deceive ourselves. We lie to ourselves. And also we deceive ourselves. Deceiving ourselves itself is a sin, is the biggest sin. And it leads to a more sinful life, which is not only sinful, but also like a life that has no meaning, no fruits, that lasting benefits. And the next ayah says, woe to every sinful self-deceiver, waylun likulli affakin athim. The one who doesn't benefit from the truth in this Quran can only be a sinful self-deceiver. And here, affak and athim are both, intensive forms. Like athim becomes athim, like alim, alim. And affaq also is like, this is someone who not only is a liar, but a habitual liar, someone who is constantly making up lies, because it's not like from time to time we tell ourselves a lie. When we are in that state, it is our state of being. So it is a habitual a liar, one who lies to himself, who deludes himself. He's ma'fook. Ma'fook is perverted in his judgment. He doesn't have a good judgment. He is deceiving himself. It's a deceit as well. Ifk is falsehood, deceit. And this word of ifk reminds me of فَأَنَّا تُؤْفَكُونَ, which is an expression that is repeated in the Quran. How deluded can you be? How are you deluding yourself? How can you be so deluded? This is repeated in the Quran. For instance, in Surah Al-Fatir, which is Surah 35, Ayah 3, we're told, O people, call to mind, remember the blessings which God has bestowed upon you. Is there any creator other than God that could provide for you sustenance out of heaven and earth? There is no God except him. There is no deity, nothing worth worshipping except him. And yet, how are you deluded? It means, how are you deluded from the truth? The truth is, if you stop and reflect, you will understand that only the one who has control over all earth and heavens and earth can feed you from earth and heaven, because water comes from heaven. So how can you La ilaha illahu fa'anna tu'fakun, like how can you delude yourself? But we do delude ourselves. I'm not talking about atheists. I'm talking about ourselves, how when we live on a daily basis. So who is this sinful self-deceiver? We are told in Ayah 8, the one who hears God's ayat when they are conveyed to him, and yet he persists arrogantly as though he had not heard them. Hence, announce unto him grievous suffering. So now suffering is coming. يسمع آيات الله تتلى عليه ثم يصر مستكبرا كأن لم يسمعها فبشره بعذاب أليم. And here there are degrees of self-deception. Like hearing God's ayat when they are conveyed onto us, and yet living as though they had not heard them, is something that can be done at various degrees. It's not necessary for us to deny the ayat, God's ayat, in order to live as though we have not heard them. I mean, everyone can look at their own life and how much do we remember God's ayat and we live accordingly. This is especially true for people who live in a state of shirk, and to the extent that we are lacking in tawheed, it means where the lack of tawheed is a hidden shirk. Because remember, shirk is not to deny God. The mushrik also believes in God. Shirk is not denial, but associating partners to God, giving power, giving effect to things themselves, while forgetting about God, being unaware that God is our Rabb 24/7, everywhere, all the time. He's our sustainer here and now. He alone and nothing else has power. He alone is the provider. He alone is the healer. If at a certain moment I have yaqeen, I have the certainty that he alone is the healer, and I hear that I have an illness, I wouldn't panic. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't be sad, because if I didn't have the sadness, I wouldn't have the desire for healing, and I wouldn't seek the healer. But that's one thing. But panicking and going like out of control is a sign that I cannot trust at that moment, because I forgot. It's not that I deny it, but I may have forgotten that God's the healer, and He has power over everything. And whatever is happening to me is happening for a purpose, with wisdom, with compassion. I think it's just like, haphazardly, why me? Why this illness? What am I going to do now? Or if I lose my job, or my money, or my house, or people who live in a peaceful land, and suddenly it's in war, and they lose their homes and their peace and everything. So believing in God and God alone, with the testimony of all His ayat in the Quran and in the creation meaning here and now is included, everywhere here and now, is an act of conscious iman. That's what conscious iman is about. That's living with ihsan. And if we don't consciously cultivate iman needs to be cultivated. That's why we need to engage the Quran continuously, constantly, because it's food for that part of us that craves meaning and purpose in life, and guidance, because it fulfills our need for guidance, which is everything else is incumbent on that need being fulfilled or not. Because if it's not fulfilled, satisfied with true guidance, then we'll waste lots of time and energy compensating with whatever is not true guidance, is just force, taking us away from our purpose in life. So if we don't consciously cultivate iman, then we can easily fall into a state of shirk. Otherwise, the moment we realize, it's a journey. Yes, we will go through states where we are not sure when we ask question, like we saw in Surah Maryam, but we would be open to immediately act on the guidance, and it will become our first getting stuck in things themselves will be not an obstacle, but an opportunity to jump up and increase our iman. When we have that conscious intention, we're making a choice that is renewed. For instance, an example that we gave many times, God, and that's repeated in the Quran, the example of water is repeated hundreds of times in the Quran. For instance, God alone grants life, we say. Okay? We believe this. This is what the Quran is telling us. And deep down, we know it's true. How about water? If we don't water our plants, they die. If we don't drink water, we will die. And so there is this part of us that has not been cultivated, that has not been, that has no tarbiyah, that needs to be this part of us that asks questions like this. Is it bad? No, it's given to us to ask questions so that the reality, the truth of things will unfold onto us, so that we can benefit from the ayat. But if we don't, if we just accept, if we don't water our plants, they will die. Therefore, water is very important, and stop there. That's it. We're going to shirk. But if we say, if we reflect on this observation and we start asking questions, as we are taught in the Quran, then we will grow in iman. And in the Quran, we are taught, for instance, in Surah al-A'raf, which is Surah 7. It's a passage that I really, really love in the Quran. Ayah 191 to 195, we are told, أَيُشْرِكُونَ مَا لَا يَخْلُقُ شَيْئًا وَهُمْ يخلقون, sorry. Do they make shirk? Do they associate as partners things, beings that cannot create anything because they themselves are being created? وَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ لَهُمْ نَصْرًا وَلَا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَنْصُرُونَ, and they cannot help them because they themselves can't help themselves. And if you pray for them for guidance, they won't respond to you, because as far as you are concerned, it is all one, whether you invoke them or you keep silent. If whatever you do, they won't answer, they won't respond, they are not conscious. Water is not conscious. Truly, those whom you invoke besides God are only created beings like yourselves. Invoke them then and let them answer your prayer if what you claim is true. If water is the one giving life, ask it to give life. If you put too much water, the same water would kill the plant. Have these perchance feet which they could walk? Or have they hand with which they could grasp? Or have they eyes with which they could see? Or have they ears with which they could hear? Say, call to your aid, to your help, all those to whom you shuraka'ukum, all those partners to whom you attribute a share in God's power and divinity, and thereupon contrive against me and give me no respite. Like, this is a challenge. But can you see how the Quran is teaching us how to ask the right questions, how to reason in the right way? He says, look at the water. And it's carrying on in this passage saying, truly my protector is God, who has bestowed this divine book from on high, for it is He alone who protects the righteous. Whereas all those whom you invoke in His stead, for instance water, are neither able to give you help nor to help themselves. And if you pray unto them for guidance, they don't hear. And if you imagine that they look at you, that they behold you, they do not see. So when we question in this particular example the relationship of water and the giving of life to any living being, in this way, in the way that we are guided to do in this passage of the Quran, in this ayat of the Quran, we realize that water is unconscious, it is lifeless, it has no hand with which to grasp, no feet with which to walk, no ears with which to hear, no eyes. It means it is unconscious, it is lifeless. Therefore, it cannot give life. It cannot create anything, as we are taught. Since itself, it is being created right here and now. If the molecules of hydrogen oxygen are not kept together, they can't keep themselves. They can't create themselves. There will be no water. It has neither the power nor the knowledge nor the life that we are attributing to it unconsciously, heedless, when we're in that state of ghafla. It is as though water becomes like something that knows and can act and has power and is giving life. So the giving of life to all living beings through lifeless water becomes clear that is the ayah. Not water on its own. If water was sitting there forever and we never interacted with it, we wouldn't know what it were. And there would be no message, no meaning. It is that interaction, the lifeless water and the giving of life together, that's the ayah. And this reality is mirrored in the Quranic ayah, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. says, we made, it means not the water. Water is being used in the giving of life. We made out of water every living thing. Will they not then believe? And that's why the one who comes and say, you believe in God? What do you mean? Like, here it is. And that's called reasoning. That's scientific reasoning. That's what we learned at school as kids. They said, look, if you don't water this plant, it will die. Therefore, water is an efficient cause in the growth and the life of the plant. This is not reasoning. This is irrational, illogical. There's no logic. Just because something is not there, it doesn't mean that when it's there, it's doing it. Just because someone says, look, when the bulb is broken, you see there is no light. Therefore, the bulb is has something in the production of the electricity? Not at all. It's just part of the system. There are two different things. In logic, you cannot go from one to the other. Yet, that's how we've been taught. Why? Because reasoning without having that openness to ask questions, that open heart, that willingness to surrender, to listen to divine guidance, doesn't take us, doesn't help us much. Sorry.
Sister Yamina, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for going through this again and sharing these verses from Surah 7. Water is one of those, an example of all these things that we idolize, we think as sources of power or life and so on. Another one is chance. We say it just worked it out itself. It just worked out that way, and then we keep hearing that in the name of science again, that somehow things worked out and each living being, it just popped up somehow, like just randomly, it just happened. And today I happened to read some scientific news about this surgeon in Italy. He is getting ready, according to this medical news, to have an operation where he will do head transplant. So there's this person who's sick and his body is not functioning well. So he wants to cut off the body, sever his neck, and bring somebody who just died, but his body is kind of in functioning state, to kind of give him that body. And they have been getting ready, and he's elaborate plan, like 100 people team that he will be working with. He found a patient who's willing to try this operation, and the different medical doctors, high rank, who have been interviewed about this idea, they're all saying this is ridiculous, it's not going to happen, like this guy is nuts. And he's like, no, I'm 90% sure that it's going to happen, it can work. And this whole discussion is an interesting thing on its own right. But what's the first thing that came to my mind was like, look, all of these, there were like several American, really high-ranked professors, medical professors, were saying this is ridiculous. Like how can he even think this can succeed? It's so complex. You can't just take somebody's head and somebody's body, and there's so many other things that can go wrong. Like, how would you? And I said, amazingly, these same people, like, they understand how hard it is to match, and these are both human beings, both human species, and almost everything looks very similar, but each person is unique. So there's no way somebody's head will connect and have that conversation with between the brain and the rest of the body. Like, it's not gonna happen.
It's not Lego pieces.
It's not a Lego pieces. Like Elif is with me here, she's saying, yeah. And the same people, though, if you ask, they would tell us, I guess not all of them maybe, but they would tell us that, yeah, of course, the whole species just emerged like that. There was this mutation, that mutation, and here you go, you have a mouse, and then it became a cat, and like this whole everything happening randomly. It just happened just by mutations, and then the ones that don't work just die, and then the other ones survive, and they become a new species, and they adjust as if like, and I felt like, wow, like everybody knows this is so complex, and you can't even intentionally, and this surgeon is intentional. He's not acting like a mutation randomly. He's acting intentionally, purposefully, has been studying and has a team. And even his chance of succeeding is zero. I mean, almost zero for these professors. But the same professors would say, yeah, somehow you have your ears and eyes, and they develop randomly over millions of years, just like that. Like, I mean, I was like, this is incredible. And then, as you were talking, and the verse is saying, you know, if you pray to these things that you idolize for guidance, they don't hear, they don't see you. Like these things that we call as mutation, random, somehow adjusted. Like none of these have any plan. Like these
well,
are
some of these things don't even exist. Actually, they're just words, as the other ayah says. They are just words that people made up. They may be useful description for things, but they are not something that exists out there.
Chance selected this, chance designed it. Like, what does that mean? It's really very empty words, but it's incredible how the Quran is inviting us to kind of press through. Like there's this whole, when we don't want to see, we make up all these names and excuses, even as the same person would not even give you the thoughts to somebody else who's intentional and planning and who's just gonna match a human being with another human being. It's not like he's gonna propose that monkey is all of a sudden becoming a human being, or a fish is all of a sudden becoming a crocodile and then becomes a bird. Like it's not even that. But like it's amazing how when we don't want to see, we can actually.
That's why it's not.
Do it ourselves.
It is not the eyes that don't see, but it is the hearts.
Yeah, that verse is
that are the hearts don't see. And the ayah is so, like it says, they can't create anything because they themselves are being created. And it says, do they have أَلَهُمْ أَرْجُلٌ يَمْشُونَ بِهَا أَمْ لَهُمْ أَيْدٍ يَبْطِشُونَ بِهَا? Do they have feet with which they could walk, or hands with which they could grasp, or eyes with which they could see? It's so detailed,
and simplified. Like it's a very good way of saying that these names that you put, like chance, doesn't have any consciousness and any capacity to plan. And even if somebody like that surgeon had consciousness, he couldn't. I mean, we work so hard, and if it's just random mutations, why don't you just turn things upside down and create some mutations, and then let's see how it goes, right? Like even the people with the hands and feet, they can't do it because it's not about literally hands and feet. It's more like this comprehensive power and comprehensive knowledge that's required.
On a daily basis, it's not even the mutation or something. It's like, for instance, money. I remember asking a group of students, I'm talking about Muslim students, like there are, like we only need God. Anything else is, of course, anything else is like we talked about water. Someone will say, okay, since God gives life, then go and live without water. That would be nonsense, because that would be taqleed again, imitation. How do we know that God is the giver of life? Through the giving, through the way he employs water. Water interacting with living beings is what tells us that God is the giver of life in the Quran. And we go out in the world and it's the same thing. We made out of water every living being. So living beings and the way they are given life with lifeless water, that's an area that the source of life is beyond both of them. That system is what reflects Wajh Allah, that reflects the name of God, Hayy, the bestower of life, the life and bestower of al-Muhyi as well. But usually we think in negative terms, and we say, if we don't have that, so for instance, the objection was, we can't live without money. So come on, like people didn't have money all the time. It's something, money is just a symbol, something symbolic. I don't need the money, I can't eat it. If there was only money and there was no water, there was no food to buy with that money. I can have all the gold or the money in the world, I won't be able to survive. They insisted, for instance, that we need the money. And of course, it's one thing to say we need the money to buy something, another to say we cannot. They insisted that we cannot live without it. And one example was given. What if someone, for instance, is very sick, needs an operation? Without the money, he would die. With the money, he may save his life. Yes, but if
he may still die, though.
he may end up dying anyways, and we even with the money. And someone else doesn't have the money for the operation, but maybe with some herbs or something, he may be given life. So at the end of the day, we're not saying that there should be no water, or that, because it's through water that we know our Rabb and our Maker and Creator. But to say that water is doing it, money is doing it, that's where shirk is. So when we don't engage the ayat actively and confirm the truth of the Quranic message, then what we're doing is actually ignoring the ayat passing by. We're passing them by without acknowledging the awesome ayat and their awe-inspiring messages. The ayat is saying, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيًّا أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. We say, okay, God creates everything. He's the giver of life. But without water, you can't have anything. And we think we can have both. We don't question them. They are both in two separate compartments. And that's it. No bridge between the two worlds. So shirk is still there. It's like when you have in the body, we have tumors or something. In our spiritual body, let's say, we have those shirky tumors. And so what we're doing is when we see water entering a plant and it grows, or when I drink water and suddenly I feel good, that's an awe-inspiring message. There is a message there. Subhanallah, how he gives life with lifeless, something lifeless and unconscious like water. So we miss those messages, those ayat that pertain to the unseen because they reflect the divine names. And like, for instance, the one who gives life to living beings with water can only be an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-compassionate. He's the giver of life. And therefore, this looks to Akhirah. And so we are told in the Quran, in Surah Yusuf, Surah 12, Ayah 105, 106, and how many a sign, how many an ayah is there in the heavens and earth. It means there are many ayat in the heavens and earth, which they pass by unthinkingly, on which they turn their backs. And most of them do not believe in God without committing shirk, without ascribing divine powers to other beings besides Him. وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُمْ بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. So we have to be very careful. We are also told in Surah Luqman, Surah 31, Ayah 23 and 24, but as for him who is bent on denying the truth, it means for the one who kafara, woman kafara, let not his denial, his kufr, grieve you. Unto us they must return, and then we shall make them understand all what they were doing in life. For truly God has full knowledge of what is in the hearts, it means in the hearts of people. And the next ayah says, we will let them enjoy themselves for a short while, but in the end we shall drive them into suffering severe. And thus it is with most people. If you ask them, who is it that created the heavens and the earth? They will surely answer, God. There is an emphasis here. Say, then you ought to know that all praise is due to God only, to God alone. For most of them do not know. They do not know what this implies, what they are saying. When they say, surely everything belongs to God, but then our gratitude goes to so many things. should be grateful to God for things, not grateful to the things themselves. Grateful for the water to the creator of the water. But mostly we cut short and we go directly to water. We don't see beyond. And then we are told in the same passage, unto God belongs all that is in the heavens and on earth. Truly, God alone is self-sufficient, the one to whom all praise is due. Like, even if we don't praise God only, praise is due to him alone, whether I know it or not, whether I practice it or not. And when I don't practice it, I am the one who is losing. Yet, we are told in another ayah, in Surah al-Zukhruf 43, ayah 9, and thus it is again with most people. If you ask them, who is it that has created the heavens and the earth? They will surely, لَيَقُولُنَّ, there is an emphasis here. The Almighty, the All-Knowing has created them. Not only God here, but خَلَقَهُنَّ الْعَزِيزُ الْعَلِيمُ. So they know that he is Almighty and All-Knowing. So knowing all this is not yet, we can know it and if we don't act on it, if we don't live accordingly, we go into shirk. Even in the surah before, it says kafara. Actually, they say God created, but actually they are ungrateful to God, because one of the first meaning of one of the meanings of kafara is, or the first meaning is to cover up, covering up the truth and therefore being ungrateful. And again, we're told in Surah Al-Zumar 39, ayah 38, thus it is with most people. If you ask them, so this is repeated again and again in the Quran. If you ask them, who is it that has created the heavens and the earth? They will surely answer, God. Say, have you then ever considered what is it that you invoke instead of God? If God wills that harm should befall me, could those things, remove the harm inflicted by him? Could the money remove the harm inflicted by him? Or if he wills that grace, that rahmah should alight on me, could they withhold his rahmah from me? Say, God is enough for me. Hasbi Allah, alayhi yatawakkalu al-mutawakkil. God is enough for me. In him alone, all those who have trust place their trust. And in Surah 43, ayah 86 to 88, we are told, and those beings whom they invoke besides God, have no power to intercede for anything except for anyone maybe, except for those who have borne witness to the truth and have been aware, meaning aware, knowing that God is one and unique, or that everything belongs to God alone. And those unto whom they cry instead, and if you ask them who has created them, not who has created the heavens and the earth, they are sure to answer, God. How are they then, how deluded they are. Again, this is the effect, the self-deluded, the sinner who is self-deceived. And he said, oh my Lord, oh my Rabb, those are people who do not believe. So they say, who created you? God. But he said, you are deceiving yourselves. And the Prophet says, these are people who do not believe. So believing does not mean just to say, God created me, God created the heavens and the earth, God is Azizun Alim. This is not enough. In Surah al-Ankabut, which is the spider, Surah 29, from 60 to, 66 or 68, I liked it, so I took all of it, because really, I think this is something very important, and we need to reflect on the meaning of this ayat. So we're told, how many a living creature is there that takes no thought of its own sustenance, including ourselves. I mean, we fill our stomachs, but all our cells, everything else, we don't know how they are being taken care of. And there are so many creatures that are being taken care of. And there's how many living creatures there that takes no thought of its own sustenance, while God provides for it as he provides for you, since he alone is all hearing, all knowing. And this makes us also, it's good news. It means stop being anxious. Yes, work for your sustenance, but as that working for sustenance is not like I am responsible for my sustenance, I am doing it. It's not a burden. It is a dua. It is getting to know God as the provider, as the Razaq. And so you start enjoying it. And God sends various ways of providing for us. He says, and next is, and thus it is with most people. If you ask them, who is it that has created the heavens and the earth and made the sun and the moon subservient? They will surely answer God. How deluded they are. Again, فَأَنَّا يُؤْفَكُونَ. God grants abundant sustenance and gives it in scant measure to whoever he wills of his creatures. For behold, God has full knowledge of everything. And thus it is again, if you ask them, who is it that has sent down water from the skies, giving life thereby to the earth after it had been lifeless? They will surely answer, God. Say, since this is so, all praise is due to God alone, but most of them will not use their reason. بل أكثرهم لا يعقلون. It means it's not like they don't reason, but they don't reason properly. Their reasoning is defective, deficient. For if they did, they would know that the life of this world is nothing but a passing delight and a play, whereas behold, the life in the hereafter is indeed the only true life, if they but knew. It means why is it saying they don't reason? Because if they reasoned properly, they would know that they would see that this life is impermanent. And so they would know that it's only a passing delight. They wouldn't invest totally in it. They wouldn't commit all of their time and life and effort and attachment and feelings and emotion all on something that is passing. Isn't that foolish? And so when they embark on a ship and find themselves in danger, they call unto God at that moment, sincere in their faith in him alone. When we are in crisis, we know again. It means deep down, we know that it's God alone. But as soon as he has brought them safe ashore, they begin to ascribe idahum yushrikun. They ascribe other things and causes a share in his divinity. They say, oh, yes, something happened, the wind changed its direction, and things like that. And thus they show utter ingratitude for all that we have gifted them and go on thoughtlessly enjoying their worldly life. And are they then not aware that we have set up a sanctuary secure for those who believe in us, the while all around them people are being carried away? It means by fear, by despair, by anxiety. Will they then continue to believe in things false and vain and thus deny God's blessings? And who could be more wrong than he who slanders God? Means slanders God with what? With shirk. Or gives the lie to the truth when it comes unto him. Comes through revelation, through divine guidance. Is not hell the proper abode for all those who thus deny the truth? It means like the guidance is the guidance to guide us to rahmah, to guide us to compassion, to healing, to the source of all goodness in this life and in the next. And we don't want to go that way. Where will we find ourselves? That's the way to paradise. If you don't follow the way to paradise, you'll find yourself outside of it. And it says, okay, that's your choice. Then it's just proper that you find yourself there. But as for those who strive hard in our cause, we shall most certainly guide them onto paths, not only one path, as many paths as the divine names that lead unto us. For behold, God is indeed with the muhsinin, with those who live in ihsan. So believing in God as Rabbul Alameen, as the sustainer of everything, the sustainer of my life here and now, is not a one-day assertion. It's a way of life. It's about living as a believer, as a abd who acknowledges her Rabb and surrenders to him, someone who lives with ihsan. And just like we benefit from the gifts and the blessing of Rububiyyah 24/7, that's what we need to focus on, the blessings that we are that we are given. And we can only become aware of that when we remember or stop forgetting, stop ignoring that everything is impermanent, everything is changing, and so our needs are being renewed. And that's where the ayahs starts coming in, that everything is being taken care of, being sustained. And so if the Rububiyyah is going on 24/7, so should our response to it, which is our Ubudiyyah. Our gratitude needs to be renewed and sustained. So back to 40.
Sister Yamina, one more ayat. I was just following your ayats and I bumped into this ayat also. It says in Zukhruf 78, 43, 78. This is the final, I think, لَقَدْ جَئْنَاكُمْ بِالْحَقِّ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ مُلْحَقٌ كَارِهُونَ. That means, verily, we have brought the truth to you, but most of you have a hatred for truth.
That's
so after this, there's nothing left for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to.
In this, it's all most people. It means it applies to us as well. It applies to maybe
or everyone except us. We're a small group.
Because mustakbir is somebody who denies the truth. The definition of the Prophet ﷺ of istighbar is number one, denying the truth and considering others inferior. So it is kind of an istighbar if we deny the truth. The first step of istighbar.
But it's not denying the truth does not mean that I don't believe in the Quran. But like in a particular situation, I think that I know what I need and I don't feel the need for guidance. In my life, most of the time we don't. The Quran is not something we live with. For most Muslims, it's like something from time to time, in certain situations only. It's not a 24/7 guidance and light. That it means in that instance, when I have that belief, that's istikbar. It means I know why. It's an arrogance. Why? Because I don't know. Because I need it all the time. And I'm not even aware of that. So it applies to us at different degrees.
I think this point is so important. It's just so crucial important. I only think it is so important that we should be very careful of finding the right way of making it clear where we are covering things up and where we are listening to the guidance. Because that, to me, that's kind of the whole point of it. I don't want to run around and run away from the messages and covering things up. And it's actually, I can't stand that. I can't live like that. So, inshallah. But it's so easy that when someone says, you just need to live according to the guidance, that I feel like I have to run away, because it's not that I can do something because someone else says so. I have to kind of, I mean, at least not if it goes together with me covering something up. So if someone says to me, I have to kind of find a completely unrelated example. So if someone says, you should in the morning make a 1 hour exercise, and that sounds like a reasonable thing. But when I have that, when I have that resistance again, that someone telling me, then it won't work. So I have to kind of make sure that
Andre, inshallah, just to make it clear, we're not talking about someone telling us. We're talking about who is speaking to us in the Quran. God is speaking to us. Who is interpreting the Quran for us? The prophets. So the Prophet ﷺ and God is not anyone. We're not talking about your local imam in the mosque or something.
Yeah, right. But we have to make that point very clear, because I mean, so the people that listen to us is everyone, and also among us, I'm not really sure what we understand.
So the imam is someone like me. He also makes mistakes. We are all together listening to the divine word, and we do listen to each other because we learn from each other, and we remind each other. But when I reflect on the divine word, and also we learn how to, for instance, how to approach the Quran. For me, it was the commentary of Imam Badi Zaman Said Nursi, his Risalat al-Nur. Without that, before I did read the Quran, but I didn't understand it in the same way. I read lots of tafsir, but it was not clear to me how to engage actively with the ayat. So we do benefit from each other's insight, but at the end of the day, we only benefit to the extent that each one of us feels the need, and I feel the need to the extent that I accept and surrender that I am not self-sufficient and I am in need of guidance. And that's not enough. Once I accept that need, I also have to surrender and make the intention to consciously act on it, which means that when I forget, when I make a mistake, the moment I realize it, or someone else realize it through me becoming aware of it, or someone else reminding me, I don't resist. Inshallah, that resistance should be less and less, and immediately surrender and make istighfar and try to get back on track, inshallah. Because it's not.
I could sign everything until the point where you said that when someone reminds me, and of course, I mean, it's true that when someone reminds me, then inshallah that will be someone who's sent from God to remind me, and to who is a good friend. But
even if the person is not a good friend, someone in the street, or someone who was angry at me, someone who was rude, including the good friends are welcome, alhamdulillah. But even when it is not, everything is again sent to me by God. So when I am in that state of surrender, I don't take it personally. Everything becomes an opportunity, inshallah. So back to 7 and 8, we said, woe unto every sinful self-deceiver who hears God's ayat when they are conveyed to him, and yet persist arrogantly, istikbar, as though he had not heard them, hence announce unto him grievous suffering. And we said there are degrees of self-deception. So there are those who openly reject the truth. After they hear the ayat, they live as though they had not heard the ayat. They live in the total delusion of being self-sufficient, that mustakbir, that's unaware of their need for guidance, and they live their lives as though the world were permanent. So there is no creational ayat, no meaning that transcends the things themselves. There is no meaning that looks to akhirah, that looks beyond the world, the created world itself. All the meanings they see are only things themselves in themselves for themselves. And there are all those who do not reject or deny the truth, yet they do not make an effort to confirm the truth of the ayat, a conscious choice. They don't make a conscious choice, a conscious effort to confirm the truth of the ayat of the Quran, and therefore in the creation. And so they end up living in ghafla, in heedlessness, as though the world were permanent, and often as though they themselves were self-sufficient. And this is a hidden arrogance. It's not the same arrogance as the first one, definitely not at the same level, but it is still a kind of arrogance. We do not say it openly like the first group. We don't say, this is my life, I do whatever I want, but I act as if I know how to live my life, I know what's good for me. And this is a lie, this is a self-deception, and it leads to living life deprived of meaning and purpose and guidance and light. And that means in those situations we are living in bubbles of darkness, the darkness of self-deception, of self-sufficiency, of the ego pretending to know. And as long as they are unaware, they don't realize what they are missing. And so it doesn't seem like a loss because there is nothing to compare with. It's only felt maybe as a longing for something better, or a discontent, or people talk about these kind of things in life. But in the hereafter, when Yawm al-Din, when everything is clear, not only will we all realize the enormity of what they missed, but also that they missed it for good. And that itself is a cause for grievous suffering, adab and loss of regrets, as we are told in the Quran, in ayah 11 of Surah 40. They will exclaim, "Oh our Rabb, you have caused us to die twice, just as you have brought us to life twice. Now we confess our sins. Is there a way to go out of this situation?" But of course it will be too late. Some will ask to go back to life, but it will be too late. So it would be too late for regret. And all these ayat are for us now, because we can imagine that situation and stop now. And in ayah 9 we're told, and for when he does become aware of any of our messages, he makes them a target of his mockery. For all this, there is humiliating suffering. وإذا علم من آياتنا شيئا اتخذها هزوا أولئك لهم عذاب مهين. And this ayah mentions another blameworthy quality of the arrogant self-deceiver, and this is mocking. They not only ignore the divine ayat, messages, the signs, but they also react to them with mockery, with ridicule. And since the offense is humiliation, the mocker's repayment is also humiliation, and this was not difficult to understand. When they will realize how ridiculous and how misguided they were when they arrogantly mocked the truth as though they knew, when in fact they had no idea what the truth was, that realization itself will cause them to be humiliated. Imagine you go out and you start saying, this means this, or let's say I'm a mathematician and I say, this is the way someone comes and solves the problem and I say, are you kidding me? This is not the solution, this is the solution. And afterwards, it becomes clear that that person was right and I am the one who was wrong, and I made a big fuss about it and humiliated the other person. Who will feel humiliated? It's clear that it comes like if you mock then you will feel, if you humiliate, you will feel humiliated. And so it will become clear to all that they were the ones self-conceited and deceitful. They didn't know the truth. We are told in the Quran, يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. They know only some appearance of the life of this world, and they are unaware, they are heedless of the ultimate reality, which looks to Akhirah. In Surah Al-Rum, Surah 30, Ayah 7. And in Ayah 8, we are told, have they not pondered, reflected upon themselves? أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ? Haven't they not contemplated upon themselves? God has not created the heavens and the earth and all that is between them without truth and a term set by Him. And yet, behold, there are many people who stubbornly deny the truth, that they are destined to meet their sustainer. So inshallah, we'll stop at Ayah 10, and I want to read it because I want to invite those who are willing to engage with the Quran to reflect on something. And I'll tell you why, because, okay, I'll read it first. من ورائهم جهنم ولا يغني عنهم ما كسبوا شيئا ولا ما اتخذوا من دون الله أولياء ولهم عذاب عظيم. Hell is ahead of them, and all that they may have gained in this world shall be of no avail whatever to them, and neither shall any of those things which instead of God they have come to regard as their protector. Nothing will benefit them. Anything that they have had in this world, or anything that they thought were their protector, for awesome suffering awaits them. And the reflection was like, there was this, the suffering is repeated, the humiliation, now there is Jahannam, hell is ahead of them. And so I felt, oh my God, like, what's going on here the first time I read it? Like, we keep these ayat are talking about humiliating, suffering, hell. What's going on? Where is the wisdom? Where is the compassion? Where is the healing for us in this message? And this is the question I want to invite you to ponder over, to contemplate and reflect, inshallah. What is the wisdom and compassion and healing in all this last ayat, especially in ayah 10? And I'll give you a cue, something that I personally practice, which is when I feel overwhelmed, and I did feel very overwhelmed with this ayat when I first read them. Then what I do, and you can do this if you want, but I feel that it helps me a lot. I acknowledge it, because what I used to do a long time ago was always like ignoring it. I minimize it, ignore it, it's not there. Immediately I get busy with something else and I ignore it. But now I felt that feeling of overwhelm is an ayah. It is created then. But it's so overwhelming that I cannot even deal with it. So I acknowledge it and I make an appointment with it for some days later, let's say 3 days later, and I go onto my phone and put it in my calendar for a specific time, and you keep the appointment with those feelings. It's integrity. So in 3 days, I'll come back to you and then I will listen to you. Meanwhile, so once I make the appointment with those overwhelming feelings, it becomes easier to let them aside. And even if they pop up during those 3 days, each time I say, I'm sorry, like I have an appointment with you later. So it becomes so easy to say, okay, later. And then I focus on getting curious about what possible good messages can come from this situation. I don't use it only for the Quran. The ayat in the Quran, the ayat in my life, in the creation. But in this case, we can do it for this particular ayah. if you're okay with it, you go ahead and reflect. But for me, the first thing was like suffering and humiliation, and then we said hell. It was like, oh, this is too much.
And actually, it's not just one or two verses. Like I noticed there are like 4 verses right after each other, all referencing suffering. 8, 9, 10, 11.
Yes. So I said, okay, I'm making an appointment for later. But then I could focus on being curious, like what is the wisdom? Where is the guidance in this? Where is the healing in this ayat? So this is just a way of dealing with it. And so you can listen to the message. And by the time it's 3 days are over, then I can listen to those overwhelmed. And now they have a new meaning because now I'm looking at it in a different way. I'm looking at the same situation and the same area with a new perspective, with a much wider perspective. So it starts speaking to me, and I start receiving the message, because in the beginning, that fear, that anxiety can control us and we get blinded. So إن شاء الله سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه آمين يا أرحم الراحمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Yamina. The way you described your journey of reflection was very, very interesting. And it reminded me of the verse you quoted today, the verse that says, as for those who strive hard in our cause, we shall most certainly guide them onto the paths. So maybe, this method of kind of postponing the feeling, but then turning it into curiosity, and so on, all that process maybe subsumed on under this notion of striving hard in God's cause, trying to understand the ayat, and then inshallah will be guided. It also reminded me of Ibrahim alayhi salam's journey, how he was overwhelmed with his search for God, when he realized that anything that he was focusing on was setting and leaving him, and then he finally said, I don't like things that set, and that pushed him towards God. Anyhow, so this is a very interesting suggestion, and then I think we all note the opportunity for next week to reflect on this. What do we make of these? How do we understand these verses from 9 through 8, 9, and then 10, 11, all making reference to suffering? How do we see the signs in there? How do we see the guidance and healing there? So inshallah, it's 10 o'clock. We have had a mashallah rich session. Unless somebody has something that they cannot keep for next week, we will pause here. Okay, so thank you very much for everyone who joined us tonight, and thank you for those who actively contributed. And Jazakallah khair, Sister Yamina, and we shall inshallah continue from verse 8 onwards next week, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.